This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Wiser Books. Wiser Books is celebrating 60 years of publishing the very best in occult and esoterica. You can check out their extensive and inspiring range of reading material by going to wiserbooks.com. That's WEISER books.com. Today's episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Witch Baby Soap. Do you like to dwell in the shadows but stay squeaky clean? Then Witch Baby Soap is the soap for you. They make fabulous occult-themed body products like coffin-shaped bath balms, tarot card soap, and crystal-embedded body butters. Their recipes are made with magical intentions, and they're free of all of those nasty things like sulfates and parabens. And now you can get 15% off orders using offer code WITCHWAVE. That's WITCHWAVE, one word, on witchbabysoap.com. So get ready to wind down, lather up, and get some Witch Baby Soap products using offer code WITCHWAVE now.
The world is filled with bewitching people, and you might be one too. Welcome to the podcast where art is magic is real, and reality is stranger than dreams. I'm Pam Grossman, and this is The Witch Wave.
Hello and welcome to The Witch Wave. I know it's staying lighter, longer, and that is a truly magnificent thing. But today I actually want to focus on the topic of darkness. Because even though it's sunnier out, and I am loving that in many, many respects, I confess I've been battling with my own shadow side lately in various forms. And as much as I appreciate the glorious weather, and I truly do, sometimes the sun and the warmth can throw one's inner turmoil and struggles into high relief. It's beautiful out, and so I should be shining too, shouldn't I? I should be smiling and radiant and full of cheer, and why aren't I, and what's wrong with me, and why am I still so gray, and can you relate to this at all? Well, the fact of the matter is, while the cycles of nature can certainly affect us, sometimes the heart goes through its own season. In times like these, I try and remind myself that darkness is nothing to fear, and that it brings its own gifts and its own magic. This past weekend, I moderated a conversation with the artist Jessie Bransford, who was a guest on the show recently, and another great esoteric artist named Elizabeth Insomnia. We were gathered at Jessie's current art show, and we were discussing some drawings he's done of the 10 Mahavidyas, which are 10 Hindu goddesses of wisdom. Each of these 10 goddesses is said to represent a different energy or emanation of consciousness, and some could say that they're all different facets of the great goddess that's within everything. At first glimpse, some of these goddesses might seem a bit softer or lighter than others, such as Tara, who is a deity of protection and knowledge. She seems nice, doesn't she? Who wouldn't want to spend time with her? On the other hand, another one of the 10 Mahavidyas is Dhumavati, a goddess of death and suffering. Her name translates to the smoky one, and in tantric practice, she's considered a widow goddess who represents loss, decay, and deterioration. Well then, maybe Dhumavati is not going to be first on your list of party invites. After all, who wants to hang around in the charnel grounds voluntarily? Who wants to suffer? But Dhumavati is also a goddess of dissolution. She melts away illusion and superficiality so that we can see the truth of things. One of her epithets is the tender-hearted goddess, and she is also a bestower of boons and supernatural powers. She's a solitary goddess who dwells in places of seclusion or liminality, and so she may hold your hand while you are walking in your own deterioration or isolation. She's reminiscent of the death card in tarot, which isn't necessarily about a literal death, but usually represents transformation, a shifting from one state into another, which, yes, may include some grief and mourning, and definitely teaches us to let go of old ways of being. And so there is great beauty and there are great lessons to be found in the dark. I've also been thinking about Lilith, the Mesopotamian goddess who much later in world mythology became the predecessor to Eve. Lilith was Adam's first wife, and their marriage didn't go so well. As legend has it, she refused to submit to him. Sometimes stories say she refused to lie beneath him. But in any case, she was cast out from the Garden of Eden. Her name translates to night monster or screech owl, and she is considered a mother of demons and darkness. All of that said, she is also a goddess who has become sacred to modern witches because she is a goddess of independence, free will, and sublime beauty. Interestingly, some theorize that Lilith later morphed into the Strix, the monstrous owl in Roman lore. And the word Strix later evolved into strega, which, as you probably know, became the catch-all Italian word for witch. And so the link between nocturnal goddesses, owls, and witches is thousands of years old. And this reminds me that there is deep power and an inner luminosity to dark archetypes, or as our former guest Kristen Soleil calls them, darketypes. There are lessons to learn and even loving comforts that we can find by traversing our own fields of trials and tragedies. We all have diurnal night times, stretches of shadow that are with us even in the light of day. Dhumavati, Lilith, and other dark goddesses can guide us during these times, or even just keep us company. We need only to be patient, to sit in our sorrow, and listen to the lessons that these deities softly whisper to us. They are here to protect us and heal us and inspire us too, even though they might seem scary at first or unsettling. They are not all negative, and neither is our suffering. These dark goddesses can bring us through our pain to a more purified, more potent state of being. That is what I wish for you. That is what I wish for me. That is what I wish for this whole world right now, which in my estimation is definitely going through a shadow period. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that there is light waiting for us on the other side. Speaking of deities and witches, today's guest, Judika is no stranger to dark goddess energy. She is a world-renowned witch and writer who has authored dozens of spell encyclopedias and books on witchcraft and the occult. On this episode, we discuss magic making, transformation, and yes, the deep power of Lilith. But before we get to that, let's check and see what's come through on the Witch Wire.
Who is it?
Witches.
A writes, in late February, I had a traumatic experience at work. I was sexually harassed and assaulted by a coworker. After digesting what happened, I reported it. To say that justice was served is a complete misstatement. After the disappointment and utter disaster of the investigation, I turned to my tarot deck for catharsis. I drew a reversed justice card. Since the whole debacle, it was creepy and eerie to draw such an insightful card. The reading said everything that I was dealing with. I was angry and feeling vengeful about the outcome. I wanted justice to be served and felt like I had been let down. It warned of wanting revenge, but it is how I feel. Even though I knew the odds of getting validation for my trauma would likely not happen. I hoped, but it didn't work out. Hi, A. First of all, I am deeply sorry to hear about your experience at work. I believe you, and you absolutely don't deserve to be the victim of any sort of harassment or assault. That sort of behavior is 100% unacceptable, and I'm so proud of you for coming forward to report it and to share your story here as well. And look, we're in a profound historical moment of truth-telling about abuse and sexual harassment with Time's Up and the Me Too movement gaining traction with each passing day. But there is also so much more work to be done. And while it's true that some of the abusers are finally facing consequences, there are thousands, if not millions of others who have still gotten away with their toxic and damaging behavior. And I'm so sorry that your abuser is one of the people who seems to be getting off scot-free right now. That must be a really painful thing to have to work through, and I don't blame you for feeling vengeful in some moments. I think it's great that you are turning to spiritual tools to help give you guidance and bring you strength. And reading tarot is absolutely a phenomenal method to help anchor you during a time of feeling unmoored. But here's the thing to know about tarot, or any sort of magic, as we discuss a little later on this episode. It doesn't necessarily work in the same time frame that we do. This tarot reading may be referencing something that will happen weeks or months or years later. It may be spotlighting something that is happening right now or that has happened in your past that is still influencing you in the present. And finally, I like to remind people that reversals in a tarot reading don't necessarily mean it's the opposite of the card. I like to think of reversals as unconscious energy that has yet to be expressed, or a vibrational current that's more underground right now and has yet to emerge. So it could be that this justice card being reversed doesn't necessarily mean that justice won't be served. It could just mean that it's going to take some time for it to become fully realized, or that it's going to bubble up in a way that might be different than the ways in which you're imagining. I truly hope this is the case here. I hope that down the road, this person will have to face up to what they did to you. I suggest that for the time being, you focus on what you can control. You focus on not letting those vengeful feelings consume you. Also, you've reported this person to the proper authorities, but there may be a couple other things that you can do or steps you can take, whether it's people you can tell, support groups you can join, a desk you can move, I don't know. But even if you've done all that you can or what you feel currently able to do, you must focus on healing yourself. Because if you continue to suffer because of this asshole's heinous behavior, that would be very unjust indeed. I am sending you lots of strength, solidarity, and unwavering love. Now, on to my guest. Judika Illes is an author, a teacher, and a longtime practicing witch. She has written over a dozen witchcraft classics, such as The Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells, The Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, and Magic When You Need It. As an editor at Wiser Books, she's also put together anthologies of speculative fiction, including The Wiser Book of the Fantastic and Forgotten and The Wiser Book of Occult Detectives. I'm particularly partial to her Wiser Field Guide to Witches, which is a compendium of historical and fictional witches through the ages. And as if she wasn't busy enough, Judika speaks and teaches at conferences and shops around the globe, and she also has a private practice where you can hire her for metaphysical consultations. Judika is one of the kindest and most knowledgeable witches and people overall that I know. So I was thrilled to have her join me on a gloriously gloomy day here in my Brooklyn apartment. Judika Illes, welcome to the Witch Wave.
Thank you, Pam. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here in the flesh. What a joy and an honor it is to see you. So you are one of the few people that I would consider an actual professional witch. You are a polymath, a writer, an editor, a teacher. You've written 4 encyclopedias of magic and tons of other books, some of which we'll talk about today. So first I have to ask you, how the hell do you find the time to do all of this?
Well, I don't sleep. First of all, sleep is overrated. I don't really sleep very much. I just do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm always stretched very thin. And I think there are probably people listening going, oh, that's why she hasn't answered my email. But that is why I haven't answered your email.
Exactly. One of the books that I want to start talking about is perhaps the book that you're most famous for, which is your Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells. This thing is 1,108 pages, is that right?
Yes.
And there are literally thousands upon thousands of spells.
Oh, no, there are 5,000. They counted. There's more. There are more. Oh, no, once you call it... The publisher was wed to the concept of 5,000 spells, and once you name a book 5,000 spells or any number, you know that there will be a reader who is at home counting them. So if you have the book and you look to the side of the book, each spell has like a little graphic next to it. Mm-hmm. That's how they know how many spells are in there, because they counted the graphics.
Oh my goodness.
Plus there are more. Plus there are some of the text that are not counted. So there's more.
And this book is so comprehensive. You're drawing spells from so many different traditions and cultural groups. You have everything in there from animal magic to good luck spells, protection spells. You know, you talk about certain deities. I mean, this is really an encyclopedia in the traditional sense of the word.
It became one. That wasn't the original intent. It was my 3rd spell book. This is my 3rd book. I had written 2 smaller spell books before this. And the publisher, who knew I collected spells, I had done an earlier book with 150, talked me into it. It was not originally, I didn't necessarily want to do it originally, but he talked me into it. And they already had the number 5,000 in mind. And the luxury of doing a book like this is you're able to do all these spells.
Yes.
You can do all kinds of practical spells, impractical spells. You can do different versions. There is, the famous anti-gossip beef tongue spell. I've got like half a dozen versions in there, plus one for vegans. So,
is that a soy tongue it would use?
Ice.
Oh.
Ice.
Okay.
We're going to ice that tongue.
Amazing. Makes sense.
But, that was the luxury of doing that book, because in my previous books, you had to choose which version of this spell do I want. I have formulas for Florida water, and the first two books have different formulas. But, it's like a brownie cookbook.
Mm-hmm.
You could have a cookbook with, 100 recipes for brownies. You could do the same thing with Florida water. You could have 100 different formulas.
Well, I love that you mentioned that, because I think so many people have perhaps the misconception that there is only one correct recipe for, say, Florida water, or one great good luck spell from a certain tradition. And I really love the fact that you show that these spells are adaptable and they change depending on the
They need
context.
to evolve. If anything that is alive has to evolve. And you have to make it work for you. Mm-hmm. And, people are, 5,000, that's so many. It's nothing. In the capacity, I mean, it's something for me to have written it. But in the scope of spells are like the stars in the sky, the grains of sand on the beach. You could do 10,000, 20,000. It's endless. And, they're always evolving. And as, now there are spells with technology, with the internet, with computers. Mm-hmm. They didn't have that 100 years ago.
Emoji spells.
Yep. Right. Mm-hmm. And who knows what we'll have in 50 years or 100 years. There'll be something we can't even conceive of yet.
I love that. And so if someone was to read a recipe or a spell in this book, and let's say they have 3 out of 4 of the ingredients, what do you tell them about that 4th ingredient?
It depends on the spell. It depends on the ingredient. There's no one answer to that. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes there is no substitution. Sometimes there are, for a simple money spell, green leafy plants are used in money spells because they evoke cash. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have a basil leaf, which is very popular, you could use a cabbage leaf. Mm-hmm. But there are items that are very unique and their powers are very unique, and you can't just switch them out for someone else. That's like, there's an old blues song, if you can't go, your sister will go. It's the equivalent of, well, if you're too busy, I'll just take some girl who looks like you. It's a little insulting. You have your own unique power and you are your own unique person, and you can't just, any brunette will do. So sometimes if you can't find the ingredients, it means you should look for another spell.
Okay.
Spells are for smart people. It's not, even though they look like recipes, it's not like a cake mix. Mm-hmm. If you buy a box of mac and cheese or a cake mix, there are directions. And if you follow the directions, ideally you get what looks, the picture on the box. Mm-hmm. But spells are mysterious and they're powerful. And it's not that predictable, even though they do work. They work in mysterious ways sometimes. So you need to look at the ingredients and think about why they're there. Mm-hmm. It's not random. Nothing in a spell should be random. Mm-hmm. The book that I wrote after that was the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft. And the first section, and they had to talk me into writing that one also. The first section I wrote was a section on plants, because as I was completing 5,000 spells, I was very frustrated, because in order to get 5,000 spells into even a 1,000+ page book, you don't have a lot of extra room. And so I couldn't really explain why is this ingredient in this spell? Because it might look like I'm making it up, or it might look like it's random. Like why apples and not oranges? Mm-hmm. Why this herb and not that herb? But there's a reason. Mm-hmm. Even if you may not need to know the reason for the spell to work, but there is a reason. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to write a section in Encyclopedia of Witchcraft that talked about witchcraft plants. and the unique powers to each plant, so that, hopefully people would read that also and go, oh, wow, that's why that's in that spell.
And they can then make their own spells too.
Yes.
Which I think that's one of the things I often try to impart on people, that absolutely spell books are crucial for basic understanding, and they're wonderful as references. And sure, if you only want to use spell books, do. But also we all have the power to create our own spells as well. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. And spells have all been created by human beings. Every spell was created by at least one human being and then tweaked by many others, especially those spells. There are spells that have lasted thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And so, they've evolved. But everybody is different. And I get a lot of mail about this. So everybody is different. And we are, even an individual is sometimes at a different place at different times. And sometimes it's very powerful and fun and effective to tweak a spell or create your own spell. And sometimes people are nervous about that and they want to follow the directions. Mm-hmm. And sometimes even the most gifted, adventurous spellcasters having a hard time, and you just want someone to tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. And it's all good.
Yes.
It's all supposed to be there to make your life better. And if it's doing that, it's fine. Whatever it's doing to make your life better, then it's working.
That's great. That's great. So I have to ask, how did you write a book of 5,000 spells? I mean, without giving all your secrets away.
No, there's no secret.
What was the methodology? Because, my goodness, that sounds like such a daunting task, and you did it 4 times.
Well, it was an evolutionary process for me, too. I have a very large unpublished manuscript that is probably the prototype for 5,000 spells that I began in the late 1980s. It's a large book on fertility, on methods of getting pregnant that don't involve infertility technology. Mm-hmm. And originally it was a personal thing for me, and I was looking for things for myself. And then I am my own testimonial. I have 2 children, but it hooked me. It was really, really interesting material, and herbs and goddesses and all sorts of stuff. And I was, and even after I didn't need it anymore, I started researching it, and I just kept doing it. And there was a point in my life where I was not in a happy place, and I was not in a good relationship. And I lived with someone who sometimes didn't come home, or, you didn't know who was coming home. Mm-hmm. So I would stay up all night and just research, because that's what I did. And I kept coming across really interesting things that had nothing to do with what I was researching. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, I had my blinders on, and I only focused on what was my topic. But then, the stuff would itch at me. Wow, that is so interesting, and I bet it's useful for someone. Mm-hmm. And so I would just started keeping files. I have long boxes of file cards, just boxes and boxes. And it's where I met Maria Padilla, because I just found her and I thought, oh, this is interesting.
Will you tell listeners who that is?
Maria Padilla. And her name was translated wrong, and I knew it had to be wrong. Maria Padilla is actually a historical person. She was a uncrowned Queen of Spain who it's a very tragic love story, and she was perceived as a witch in her lifetime. And after she died, became venerated by the gypsies, the Gitanos of Iberia, when they were transported forcibly to Portuguese colonies in Brazil. They brought her with them, and she evolved into a goddess. She was sort of a fairy queen in Spain, but she became this very, very profound goddess who was incorporated into these African diaspora traditions, and is, and her name was being translated as Little Mary Sandalfoot. Oh. And I was looking at the description, I'm going, this can't be right. And it itched at me. Mm-hmm. It just itched. I couldn't leave it alone, so I went back and started researching her. Mm-hmm. And I just started putting stuff together. Meanwhile, I was trying to publish my fertility book, which for a variety of reasons has never been published. But a publisher liked my chapter on magic spells and said, an unsolicited manuscript, it's a sort of a wild story. He liked that chapter and said, could you do a book on this? And I said, yeah, of course. And I did. And then I wrote another book for him. And he was the one who came up with 5,000 spells, but I think he remembered the older book. And he knew I had this, and I still, I still collect new spells.
So you just live amongst this library of spells.
I love the researching. We were talking earlier before we started taping, I don't love writing. I do it. It's work for me, but I love the research.
Yes.
The research is if I could just do that, if I could siphon the words out of my brain onto the paper.
Yes.
I
can relate.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. I love having written, but not the writing.
So looping back to the original question, did you only rely on this library of spells, or were you kind of asking other people to send you spells, or was it more of a solitary?
Originally, it was very solitary. I was living in Los Angeles in the beginning, and I was a very solitary person there. Originally, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I was just doing this for myself. I did not have an intention of publishing it. I was just researching and cataloging.
Yes.
I have the soul of a librarian.
Yes.
And that's all I was doing at that point. And mainly, some of the spells in that book are mine. They're creations of mine. Some of the things are, nothing is really directly out of a book. Everything is filtered through my vision, through my words, through, there's no sort of cutting and pasting there. Some of the things were not written in spell form. I read a lot of books by missionaries who went to the South Seas and other places and talked about the witch doctors they met and talked about what they saw people doing, and often with a lot of disapproval. And I tried to get behind them. I tried to see through their eyes. What were they seeing without the disapproval? What were these shamans and witch doctors and witches, what were they trying to preserve or demonstrate or communicate? And, I hope I did them justice. And then after a while, once I actually started writing the book, everybody who helped me is in the acknowledgments, but I would call people up. It's a whole story. We lost a file of spells. It was Sandy Liss, who owns Soul Journey in Butler, New Jersey, can attest. I was calling her up, give me a spell. Teach me a spell.
Yes.
I need 2 more spells.
Yes.
I don't have any animal cruelty spells in there. There are no spells in there that
spells against animal
There are no
cruelty?
spells that involve animal parts.
I see.
There is a section for animals, but those are spells to benefit animals.
What about that tongue you were just talking about?
That's
something you get at the butcher.
That's something you get at the butcher. Do not mutilate a cow.
Okay.
Do not mutilate a cow. If you eat at an old school deli or a German restaurant, there will be beef tongue on the menu.
Yes.
Go to a butcher and get a beef tongue.
Yes. So speaking of beef tongue, this is quite a segue, but my father loves eating tongue sandwiches at a Jewish deli.
Yeah. It's a very old school food.
Yes. And like me, you were raised Jewish.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear about, okay, you're this Jewish kid. How did you become a witch? When did this happen?
I incorporate everything. I just grow. I don't see that there's a conflict necessarily. Possibly a rabbi might not agree with me. I'm not necessarily a conventional person, and I wasn't raised by conventional people. So that wasn't. I think that there is a huge school of Jewish magic and many Jewish witches, in the same way that there are Sufi magic and I know people don't like it, but I know a lot of people who self-identify as Christian witches. Who am I to say they're not?
Yep.
We have to let people identify themselves. No, I don't find that it's contradictory.
When did you start identifying as a witch or realizing?
I don't know. I don't have a point. Always.
You just knew.
Always. I thought the wizard, I used to hate watching The Wizard of Oz because they killed the witch. But I had a witch-friendly mother. When she told me stories, the witch was not the bad person. My mother taught me Baba Yaga.
Yes.
I learned it from my mother orally. And, she is a cannibal, but she's also the heroine of the story.
Exactly.
Because, things are complicated.
Yes.
And witchcraft and magic if you want the world to be really black and white, good, bad, it's hard. I think it's a hard field to be in because everyone has their reasons and people's desires are complicated. And people aren't easily put into boxes. And you can say, oh, this person is this or this person is that, whether ethnically or religiously or philosophically. And, we don't fit into boxes. And, I have Aquarius rising. I don't fit into boxes.
Yep.
It's not my nature.
Yeah.
So, I take my background and, there's some Romani ancestry in my family too. But I don't, there are a lot of really devout Christian Romanis who absolutely want nothing to do with the old image of the card reader.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I try to respect all my ancestors and if you do your DNA and your genealogy, I think most of us will find surprises in the closet. And, I try to honor all of them and not reject any of them.
Well, I definitely want to hear more about your ancestors. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Today's episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Blood Milk Jewels. I have loved Blood Milk for years because each piece of their jewelry has a story that adds to its aesthetics and talismanic qualities. Their designs are inspired by seances and surrealism and shadowy goddesses and so many more of my favorite things. They use materials like sterling silver and natural crystals and gemstones such as moonstone, labradorite, and onyx. And so each piece is crafted to be psychic armor. I also love that they've been handmade in Philadelphia using local resources since 2008. And that it's a female-owned and operated company. So check out bloodmilkjewels.com and adorn yourself with dark, sparkling beauty.
Welcome back to The Witch Wave. Today I'm speaking with Judika Illes. So Judika, you were just talking about your ancestors, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and how that may or may not have informed your practice as a witch.
Oh, I think our ancestors inform all our practices no matter what we do. And they're doing this really interesting research now about genetic memory and the things that are passed on, whether talent or trauma or all sorts of things. And I'm always cautious, with people who will say things like, all my ancestors are Italian or, all my ancestors are Jewish or whatever it is. Your ancestors are exponential and people travel. And I think it's the nature of people to be interested in other people. It's a healthy interest. So, it was very interesting because I venerate I am a promiscuous spirit lover.
Yes.
I know. And that's also something that is, I think, dependent on the individual. There are people who serve one goddess or one saint. And I've got, I am like the bartender to the spirits. I keep my liquor store and I don't even drink any of it, but I keep them in business, just, constantly buying for these different divinities. And it is my nature. But when I went back and I actually did the DNA and was able to go back only on one line of my family. Who knows what else is lurking in the closet? I found Persians, I found Africans, I found all sorts of. So I feel like I was I expecting to find Persians? No, Armenians. So I know, I speak personally. I think it is a very valuable thing to do, as a magical person, if you can do your DNA. If you can do, and whether it's the recent DNA, whether it's the haplogroups, and if you start doing it, you'll know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, the haplogroups are the root ancestry. Where does your father's all the way back? Or your mother's
And
all the way back?
you were able to find that because
23andMe will do it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's not a hard thing to do. That's a blood test.
Okay. I've done the blood test, but one of the challenges I've found as someone of Jewish ancestry is that the records just only go back for a few generations.
It depends.
Okay.
That's we could do a whole show on that.
Okay. We'll put a pin in that
do you
one.
know, sometimes I want to be like a genealogist. I think, what's my next career? Because it's detective work.
Yes.
There are actually, depending where you are, there are better records than you think, but you have to, I love the researching.
Yeah.
You're
an excavator, aren't
I am
you?
it is like being an excavator. Yeah, you can find it. It's not easy, but you can find it.
So do you feel as though your spirits, your ancestors, your deities are all around you all the time?
Yeah, behind me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you have certain deities that you have a particular relationship with, kinship with, that you feel comfortable sharing on this show?
Oh, I mean, I don't think it's a secret. If you read my books, I try to be very neutral. I think Encyclopedia of Spirits, if you read it carefully, you know who I love and who I don't.
Yes. Well, I know that you and I share a love of Lilith.
Right. It's my daughter's middle name.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. And I got a Lilith candle from you maybe about a year ago now when I really
Lilith
needed it.
was the first sacred being that I actually had, I would say, a direct personal connection with, which is a very profound experience. Because, and I know for a lot of people it's metaphor, but if to actually have that direct connection with the divine, where you put something out there and you actually get an answer, it's like being struck by lightning. It was, I would say, one of the most profound experiences of my life.
When was that?
See, I'm so old. 1989.
1989.
Yeah.
At first I thought you said 1919. I was like, you're not that old,
in my
Judika.
past life.
And so were you communing with Lilith intentionally?
I had a very interesting experience. And when I have dreams about other people, I tell people these dreams, even if it seems trivial to me. I had put out a petition, and I was at the time working as a travel consultant. I worked as a corporate travel agent, and we were in an office with cubicles. And the woman in the cubicle next to me is the least metaphysical person on earth. No interest in any of it. But, we would go out to lunch, and she was my friend.
Sure.
But no interest in common. And I had been on vacation. I went on vacation shortly after that. And she tracked me down at great personal effort. She had to call people to find, I was staying with my sister, and she had to call people to find out and get the phone number. And she felt driven to do it because she had a dream. And she recounted the dream to me, and she didn't understand any of it. But the details were a direct answer to my petition. And I always felt that she had the dream, because if I had it, I would never know, did I have the dream because I wanted to have the dream? But to have a stranger tell you things that she didn't understand was a very, very profound experience.
So Lilith was communicating to you through
I got a message, yeah. And I do it all the time now. If I have a dream for you, for instance,
yes.
I do. I call people up and I say, look, I dreamt this and this and this, because you don't know.
Yes.
It could be. It could be something very profound for them.
Yes. And we should probably tell listeners a little bit about Lilith, because there are a lot of people who are new to this content who listen to the show. So Lilith is a goddess from...
Oh, I've had people argue about that too.
She's not a goddess?
Yes. I have people, people get very... And I tell them to tell that to her. But people get very caught up in semantics.
Yes.
And different beings show different sides of themselves to different people. So I can say who I think, or my experience, and you can say your experience. And someone listening might have a totally different experience, and it doesn't negate your experience.
Okay, so why don't you tell us who Lilith is to you?
The Lilith in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, there are actually two creation stories. There's the story where Adam and Eve, where Eve comes from the rib. But if you go back a little bit before that, there is a story about a male and a female being born together from earth simultaneously, and that is interpreted as being Lilith. And that is one origin story for her. And it is sort of the first divorce. She there's a bit of a power struggle between her and Adam, and she is out of there. She escapes the Garden of Eden voluntarily and goes to the Red Sea, and is a very independent, wild, free spirit. Then there are also earlier stories of her in the hymns to Inanna. She is a being in Mesopotamia, and there are those who'll say she's a demon, or that she's a very certain kind of a, the scholarly among us will use the Sumerian term, or, and she appears there as well also as a wild, free spirit. She lives in trees, and she is a spirit then who is common to the Semitic areas. She is in Iraq and in Mesopotamia, and there are all sorts of stories of her, but she has become, Lilith is to Jewish folklore as Baba Yaga is to Russian folklore. She is both the boogie woman and the dreaded person, but also a heroine.
Yes.
And there is a wonderful book called Lilith's Cave by Howard Schwartz, which is folktales. And in the folktales are often embedded instructions for how you work with her.
How fabulous.
Yeah.
And my understanding of her is that she's become kind of adopted as a goddess of witches because she is a deity that is related to darkness, magic, the south winds,
Queen
owls, Queen of the Night, exactly.
But this isn't actually recent, because the euphemism for witches in Yiddish, if translated, is daughters of Lilith.
Ooh,
So this
that.
isn't just like 10 years ago somebody came up with this.
Yeah.
This has some history to it.
How
she
fantastic.
She is a witch. She transgresses all these rules of how women are supposed to behave when they're menstruating, and in cultures where women keep their hair very neat, Lilith. In a lot of stories, they don't actually name her. It's like, Baba Yaga is Auntie in the Woods, and Lilith is, she has beautiful hair, or she has disheveled hair, or she has both. But she's got loose hair.
And, as with witches, I think Lilith, has been demonized quite literally.
And she is the queen of demons. Some people think she's a vampire, the first vampire.
Yes, I've heard she's the mother of demons.
Vampirella. She's Vampirella's mother, I think, in Daughter of Dracula comics.
Love it.
Lilith she has this life. She shows up in all these TV shows and movies and comic books and novels, often very negatively. And I'm a little, She's also a guardian. She's also a guardian, and a protective spirit, but not necessarily. In the same way as Baba Yaga, you can't. Is she a cannibal? Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Softening her is not doing her a service.
Yes, but that's what I love about her, about Baba Yaga, about witches in general, is there is that ambiguity there, and very much this idea that we're not all good. None of us are all good.
I have an issue with people who are very quick to say I'm a white witch. Which, first of all, what does that mean? I don't approve of using certain colors to indicate evil, because that doesn't. Clearly, history shows us that doesn't lead good places.
Exactly.
But it's also like having a cat, hi, I'm a toothless, clawless cat. Don't worry. You have your power, and we have to trust people to use it ethically.
Yes. And you are not someone who necessarily hexes other people, correct?
No.
What is your standpoint on that kind of magic?
I
don't know, would you call it left-handed magic? What do you
I'm
tell
not
people?
a judgy person, so I'm not the Pope of witchcraft. I can tell you for myself personally, I think if you are working from positions of love and respect, you are okay. If you find yourself, all of us have a bad day sometimes, and all of us sometimes do things out of anger, but you shouldn't be doing it a lot. If you are constantly working out of anger, it will also attract certain types of beings to you. And it will, beyond any ethics, it is not good for you. It is not healthy for you. If you are very fearful, if you are very angry, I live in a world, we live in a world that is full of spirits all the time. All the time. There's no such thing as empty space. And so you want to be if you're radiating sort of good energy, the ones that like that will stay with you. If you're radiating fear, the ones who eat that will come and they will encourage you to be fearful because it's like, you're supplying them with their energy.
Yes.
So I try not to, but in 5,000 Spells, so my first 2 spell books have no hexes. She said, I'm not going to teach you to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to teach you how to do the Black Cat Bone. I'm not going to teach you how to do, whatever kind of animal cruelty spells, and I'm not going to teach you any hexes or curses, because if you're angry, no one has to teach you. If you are angry enough, you don't need anybody to teach you. It'll just come out of you. But when I started writing 5,000 Spells, I had a chapter of protection spells, and a lot of it is protection from other people's magic. And I realized that if you don't have a context for it, it just looks like all these people are being hysterical. And so I do have a chapter of hexes in there. And, sometimes a hex is a protection spell. And sometimes a hex is a justice spell. If people have done terrible things to you and there is no justice, or to a loved one, and there is no justice, maybe that's your moment to put it out there to the universe.
I like the way you're framing it, though, because for me, and I'm just speaking 100% personally, and you or listeners might disagree, I don't feel comfortable hexing other people. But I love the idea of doing a spell for justice.
I give it up to Hecate.
Yes, exactly.
You go out under the dark moon. I find that I try not to be too specific. I mean, unless I know for sure. John Doe. I try not to say John Doe, because every once in a while you think John Doe did it, and years later forensic evidence shows that it was John Doe. Not, Joseph Doe, not John Doe or whatever. So you could be making a mistake. So, but I will often ask for the perpetrator, or the perpetrator is known or unknown. Bring them justice.
But I love that you're not saying I want to harm them. You're saying bring them justice. I really appreciate
witchcraft
that.
Gets a bad rap. Spells get a bad rap. All these evil witches, evil spells. But there are a lot of kinds of power in the world. There's political power. There's sheer brute force. There's financial power. If you have those things, they're much more effective. It is much more effective. If you're really angry at someone, and you've got a baseball bat in your closet, that's a much more direct way. People talk about hexing, but that person is not going out to shoot them. They're
exactly.
just,
We're not condoning hitting anybody with a bat.
No, but I'm from New York.
To say.
But I am from New York, and I know what people do.
Yes.
Magic spells have traditionally been the provenance of the disenfranchised and the oppressed and the powerless. And if they had billions of dollars to take care of their problems, it's a faster way of doing it. If you can just force people to do what you want, or buy your way into things, it is faster and easier. Magic is often difficult. It is, the hoodoo people call it working, because you are working. You should be tired after a spell. And it's unpredictable. And it doesn't always, even though, yes, it works. And yes, I can tell you all my success stories, but it's not always predictable, and it's not always on the time frame you want.
That's what I was going to say. It's transcendent of time and space. So sometimes it shows up in other ways, or way down the road, or a different shape than you might imagine.
Sometimes it works out better than you expected.
Yeah.
And sometimes, one spell leads to another. Often, I will tell you that all my child support spells work. And I know that from they work for me. But somebody angry enough, but then, the response to being garnished was total rage. And so you need to go from one spell to the spell that calms somebody down, because there's no point having, getting money if you're not going to be alive to actually use it.
Exactly. On that note, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back. The Witch Wave is brought to you by Vera Meat. Vera Meat creates super magical and super modern jewelry, clothing, and accessories. They have a vast collection of stylish jewels for divination and spellcraft, such as their diamond-back snake ring, which is said to help with astral travel, and their signature Vera Talisman pendant, which is a female figure who has symbols of blessing and protection engraved all over her body. And Vera Meat loves our guest Judika Illes so much that they wanted to do something special to celebrate her. And so they are offering, get this, 50% off their entire site. That's 50% off their entire site of wonderful witchy items when you use offer code WITCH. So go to verameat.com. That's Vera, MEAT, like the food.com, and use offer code WITCH to get 50% off today. Welcome back to the Witch Wave. I'm here speaking with Judika Illes. So Judika, we were just talking about hexes and good magic and quote unquote bad magic. I have to ask, we have this person who is the head of our country, who many people have problems with. And, whether or not you are pro him or con him, if you're listening, know that a lot of people are against this guy. I think that's fair enough to say. And a lot of people feel that he is really deeply threatening to not just equality, but to people's actual safety. So there has been this spell that's been going around called, what is it?
The spell to bind Trump.
Yeah, the spell to bind Trump. And it happens allegedly every new moon. And I don't need you to comment specifically on that spell, but I am wondering, when there is a force that feels so big and so overwhelming, when it's about the state of the world, not just something personal in your life, but something that feels bigger. We have huge problems to conquer, not just paying our bills, right? It's also the environment. It's, people becoming disenfranchised, and I don't have to list it all. What do you recommend for people who want to feel as though they are helping the light shine and helping, this negative energy dissipate?
Well, there are a couple different things. I mean, in the simplest is to, what is the saying about being the change you want to see? Mm-hmm. That each of us can do what we can as individuals to live our lives the way we think they should be lived, and to be examples for other people, and, to do as much good as we can in the best way that we can. Mm-hmm. And we all have our own situations, and some of us can do more than others.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you something maybe popular and maybe something that's unpopular. This is just about the spell casting process. One, the casting of spells itself, I think, is a beneficial thing. It should be an empowering thing. It should be something, there's that old thing on the Charmed TV show with, not for personal gain, but that's a total lie. Spells are all for personal gain. And sometimes the best thing about spell casting is you find your own power. It is a journey to yourself to discover what your powers are, what's your own individual. And so I think people should do whatever is best for them and makes them feel less hopeless, less despondent, more powerful. Mm-hmm. That said, here might be the less popular thing. The mechanics of spell casting, the thing you need is a goal. When you start a spell, the thing that, is in every spell, but maybe is not in all the spell books, my own too, is at the end you want to see your goal accomplished. What exactly is it? And the more specific you can make it, the more likely it is to work in the way that you want it to work. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes your spells that are fear-based, oh my God, I don't want to die. Oh my God, I want someone to come home. Oh my God, I want someone to love me. If it is so specific, often you have a good chance of it working. The problem with group spells is that whether it is 3 people or an entire nation or the world, it is sometimes very difficult to coordinate that goal at the end. What the end result I see may not actually be the end result somebody else sees. Mm-hmm. And so it is a very difficult thing to do together as a group. Although I comprehend the attempt, and I comprehend how it is good for the people who are actually doing it. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be effective, if you doing things quietly and individually, and just sort of getting it done in a very direct way is the most effective way.
Then how do you feel about covens, and how do you feel about people who
But covens aren't just about spells. It's an interesting thing. Every once in a while, it is good to do things in a group. Sometimes there is more power in a group. You put your energy together, but not for everything.
Okay.
And sometimes, people are complicated. Let's just say you want to spell for more success, but somebody in that coven loves you and wants what's best for you and thinks if you have this kind of success, you're going to leave them. So even though people they're complex and they're
They have
often
their own
conflicted.
motivations
They
and
may mean
fears.
well. Often we think we want. We're asking for something we think we want, but in our heart we really don't want it. Yes, I'm going to try to get that job, but oh my God, I really don't want that job. So it's complicated.
So have you always been a solitary practitioner?
No, I've been in a coven. So I know from experience.
Yeah.
I know from experience because I have seen some really successful group spells.
Yeah.
I was in a small informal coven, 4 witches, and we did some good work. But it was very, very specific, and it was things that people were not conflicted about.
Okay. So just having that clarity of intention and making sure everyone's on the same page and clear-hearted and clear-eyed is really
and that
key
people
when you're doing
really
group
want
work.
what you want. And covens are about more than the spells. There are a lot of components to that. And there are things that you would do together, and maybe there are things that are very effective if you do them by yourself. Your secret desires.
So I have to say, I know you were not actually born in 1919, but you are seasoned.
It's okay. It's all over my social media. I have no secrets.
So you've seen the kind of ebb and flow of witchcraft. And
I was very young in the 70s, but I remember the 60s. I remember the 70s.
Yeah. So right now we're in this moment where witchcraft, at least from my perspective, is very much on the rise. We have Instagram witches.
It's fashionable now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's come into fashion.
Yeah, Tumblr witches,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we're seeing witchy.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
It's top of mind.
It's great.
Yeah, and I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of great work
I
being
hope it stays
done.
like that.
I hope so too. But I do have to ask, what is your perspective as someone who has seen witchcraft kind of wax and wane in popularity over the years? Why is it that sometimes it's more in the collective psyche? And what do you make of this new kind of witchcraft?
Who knows? It's in the air. I think if you got an astrologer here, they could probably give you some really interesting thoughts on why witchcraft becomes popular. It's why the ebb and flow when it is. I think it's wonderful. I think the problem comes that at times when it's popular, sort of, I think a lot of, I don't want to say bottom feeders because they're not all bottom feeders, but people who are not necessarily committed to it do see profit in it, and they kind of come, which as with everything else.
Yes.
And then when they're not making enough money, they leave. And I think the people who are really committed will stay, whether it's popular or not. And I think there are people who are maybe having fun with it. And that's great too.
Yeah, doesn't hurt anybody.
Even if this is a phase and you move on to another phase, I hope it was empowering and I hope it was helpful. And I hope that people who see witchcraft and witches as something fashionable and as something positive, even if they move on to something else, I hope that, the history of witchcraft is one of persecution. And the witches are the persecuted, not the persecutors, despite, all the propaganda. I hope that it buys us safety. I hope that people look at this and go, oh, well, that's cool. We don't have to bother. We don't have to be afraid of these people. We don't have to bother these people.
Yes.
Let them be.
Yes.
And I think that's that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean that's what I think about all the time too. Whenever someone is perhaps, I don't know, rolling their eyes or trivializing the popularity, it's like, well, what an amazing thing that we can do this out in the open now.
What a wonderful thing that we're doing this out in the open. We're having this interview.
Yes,
and
my cat is meowing. She just loves it. She agrees with everything we're saying.
I mean, I hope that and young people, young women can say I'm a witch and not expect to be locked up.
Yes.
Because historically that's what's, you've had to say you're not a witch.
Of course.
We were talking earlier about Elizabeth Pepper, who is the founder of the Witch's Almanac, and she has written about her early life in a family. They never used the word witch. It was just the things we do. Mm-hmm. And the fear of using that word, and it's still, even now with all the popularity, it's still an insult word. Mm-hmm. What people use that word as a pejorative, mm-hmm. and which I take very seriously, and I don't have a sense of humor about it. So it's not universal, and there are still, it may be popular on Instagram and Tumblr in America, but there are women in India and in Saudi Arabia and throughout Africa who are being killed and persecuted and just terrible, terrible things because whether or not they are witches, but somehow they have been branded a witch.
Yes.
It's not enough to be a witch. You just have to somehow be witchy to the wrong people.
Yes.
And so I think we're very lucky and very privileged in a good way. And I think it's something worth protecting.
I think so too. And I just think someone like yourself who has written so many books. I mean, we're running out of time because I just have so much I want to talk to you about.
Well, one of the things with 5,000 spells,
yes.
One of the ways they convinced me to do it, and the follow-up, the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, is that I felt that I was writing it from inside, because too many times outsiders are writing about other people who are witches, mm-hmm. but I was able to write from within, about my people.
Yes.
And I hope that's something that continues and more of us have that opportunity.
I mean, it's just an incredible legacy that, you're creating here, Judika, not just with your 4 encyclopedias, but, you've written the Wiser Field Guide to Witches. You have we didn't even talk about your fiction life and love with the Wiser Book of Occult Detectives and the Wiser Book of the Fantastic and the Forgotten. And one of the things I love about you is not only do you write so beautifully about witches, but you also celebrate witches in pop culture.
Oh, I'm a fan.
Yeah, I know. You gave a really amazing talk at the Occult Humanities Conference on blues music and witchcraft.
Yeah.
Like you are a living encyclopedia yourself. So I really hope that you'll come back.
I am a woman of many passions.
Yes, but I love that about you. I love that about you, and it really is such a gift. And to see someone like yourself who's so damn smart and scholarly, and yet who lives out loud and is making witchcraft accessible without watering it down. I mean, that's an act of magic in itself. So I'm so grateful to you, Judika.
Oh, you're going to make me cry, Pam. Thank you.
Of course. And just quickly, what's next for you?
I'm writing another book.
Oh.
I am writing another book, which will not be out until 2019, late in 2019.
Okay.
But I'm writing another big book and more spells, and I hope people like it.
Yes.
And I'm cutting down on the teaching, but I do have some events planned for this year. And
you travel all over the place. You're on the conference circuit, the witch pagan conference circuit.
I like to go out and meet people.
Yeah.
I like that, because then I sit in a room and by myself and, weep and write for months.
Yes. So it's
nice to have the human contact.
Absolutely, 100%. And if people want to find out more about you and your upcoming events and books, where's the best place for them to go?
I'm all over the place online. My website is my name, JUDIKAILLES.com. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and I started an Instagram that I haven't quite figured out yet, but I'm learning. And And I'm not that hard to find, but I apologize because when I'm writing, I am so slow to answer. Mm-hmm. But you know, I try. Eventually, I will. I hope.
Well, I know you get so many petitions and requests and emails as well. So I think people understand.
But I feel very blessed and grateful that people feel comfortable writing to me.
Yes.
So
yes.
I'm not complaining.
Yes, you're.
I just need clones.
Yes. You need an army of ghostly witches to fly around and help do your correspondence for you. Yeah. Yes. Well, Judika, there's so much more that I want to talk to you about. I sincerely hope that you'll come back and we can continue the conversation. And I just thank you so much
for you, Pam.
Just your writing and for being here today. You're such an inspiration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for the show. Thank you again to Judika Illes for joining me. I know it took us a few tries to schedule this, but the third time was definitely the charm. Do you have questions, feedback, need some witchly advice, or just want to share something magical that happened to you recently? Drop me an email at witchwavepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. The Witch Wave is produced and recorded by me, Pam Grossman. This episode was edited by Chiquita Pascal, thank you Chiquita, and myself. Our theme music is by Lycanthia. Special thanks go to Matt Freeman. You can check out information about this and other episodes on our website, witchwavepodcast.com. Please go ahead and subscribe to us on iTunes and give us lots and lots of sparkly stars. It makes a huge difference. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and if you have an iPhone, you really might love my witch emoji for iMessage. Fill your texts with witches, spellcraft objects, and magical symbols in a variety of skin tones, genders, and colors by searching for witch emoji, all one word, in the App Store, or by going to witchemoji.com. Thank you so much for listening. Witches are the future. I'll catch you next time on The Witch Wave.